Okay, let's start.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, ready.
All right. So, hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming. And Jean-Pierre, thank you for agreeing to give this lecture. I'm Geoffrey Barret, Luxembourg Director of the Confucius Institute at the University of Luxembourg. And on behalf of the Confucius Institute team, welcome to all of you. Before starting, let me inform that the lecture will last about 1 hour and we will have around 30 minutes for discussion at the end. Today, we are delighted to have Mr. Jean-Pierre Coene as our guest speaker. Jean-Pierre Coene is an international sales negotiation specialist. He created or developed sales in a great variety of countries. And as a cross-cultural consultant, he currently works as an associate partner at Hofstede Insights. He's the author of Négociation Internationale, l'entretien de vente en B2B, and also co-authored with Mark Jacobs the book, Negotiate Like a Local, 7 Mindsets to Increase Your Success Rate in International Business, which will be the main topic of our lecture. Through its extensive experience, the author developed a methodology to explain the fundamentals of international sales by taking the cultural differences of the interlocutors into consideration. It's a very good and unique guide to better understand how to adapt the way of doing business to local styles. And talking about local styles, today a focus will be made on understanding and managing the challenges of doing business between China and Europe. By the way, before giving the floor to Jean-Pierre, I would like to add that the Confucius Institute is especially pleased to welcome Jean-Pierre today, as the book has been recently published in Chinese, as you said, Jean-Pierre, and in China, by Fudan University Press in Shanghai with the support of the Confucius Institute. Fudan University is indeed our partner university, and my colleague Jue, who is here today, the Chinese director of the Confucius Institute, made this connection possible between the authors and the university press department, which led to this publication. And as I've just said before, quite good feedbacks about it have already been received, which is really great. So Jean-Pierre, thanks again. If you're ready, the Zoom room is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Geoffrey. Well, here we are. Negotiate Like a Local is the title of the book and also the title of this lecture. What do we mean by that? We mean that due to cultural differences, we invite people to do as they do at home. Okay. So we ask you to keep your microphone muted to make sure there is not too much noise. You can, if you have questions, don't hesitate to write them down. And so we can store it for the end of the lecture. I invite you also, if you want to have a specific question to me, you can do it through Zoom. So you can choose either to send a message to everybody or only to me. And of course, at the end, we will answer all the questions. So the two author of the book are Mark Jacobs, you see on the left, and myself, Jean-Pierre Coene. So we met because we are part of the same organization called Hofstede Insights. And we were both very much in international business. And we realized that there was a problem with specifically the negotiation. Negotiation is, and actually selling is one of the first activity two communities have together when they start to doing business. And when I was young, when I was 30 years old, I became export sales manager for a French company called Clairefontaine, selling paper. And as a self-educated person, I had the reflex to rush to a library and try to find a book. I couldn't find a book, so 35 years later, I wrote the book I would have loved to find when I was a beginner. And the book that's the book, and thanks to, indeed, as we said, to Confucius Institute, they managed to convince the Fudan University to publicize it in China. So A first little exercise I ask you, and please answer by writing down on the box which cultures are described here. Which cultures you would say are always in a hurry, are serious, reserved, restraining, composed, and methodical? Could you think about cultures in the world? There are remember you, there are 216 different countries. Which countries you would describe as being always hurried, serious, reserved, restrained, composed, methodical? Please type a few cultures on the box. I don't see anything so far. Don't you have any idea? Japanese, US, Germany, okay. Chinese, why not? Japan, Germany again, okay. Now, could you give some example of the opposite? So cultures you would see as being very relaxed, friendly, spontaneous, uninhibited, emotional, impulsive. Latin cultures, French, okay. Spanish, US, Thailand, Italy, Italian, okay. There are no right or wrong answers. It's just to make you aware of one thing, that an American, for example, will be seen as being hurried, serious, and reserved according to Mexicans, but according to Japanese, he is going to be relaxed and friendly. So what I mean by that little exercise is to make you realize, to make you feel that it depends on your perspective. You see things not as they are, but in comparison to yourself. So if we could imagine to put all the cultures on one line about that topic, you would be on the line. So the people on your right would be one type, and the people on your left would be of the other type. But ask another person on the other side of the scale, and he will have another approach. So the first very general message about culture is that we have to avoid the judgment, and we have to realize that we ourselves, we play a big role in our vision. And the vision is sometimes very difficult because in elaborate difficulties, in elaborate situations, we can have a different vision. So for us, everything started with that book, which is called Culture and Organization, written by our master Geert Hofstede, where he explains that actually the culture is a sort of programming of the mind. So we are all programmed, and this program is unconscious. We don't know exactly what are the characteristics of our own culture. And we only discovered that by comparison to others. And that's exactly the idea of that little exercise we have just done now. So this work of Hofstede was, I hope you see well my screen. I'm not sure you see everything. Is it clear for you now? So the work of Geert Hofstede gives us a framework that expresses emotion in numbers. I will explain you how. It is a very scientific research he did during years. And it helps us to really explain the different cultures. And these strikes of genius was to not to compare everything, but to take 6 dimensions which are somehow in every culture. So 6 perspectives, 6 elements, which I'm going to describe very briefly later. So we have big data, we have analysis on 110 different cultures, and these research have been validated at least more. We stopped counting actually by 6 independent studies. And we have the result for 110 countries. Now, I like to take that comparison of the color, you know. The light, the white light, you can create white line with green, red, and blue. And every color in the world, you can actually analyze the quantity of green, the quantity of red, and the quantity of blue to create any color in the world. Well, it's a bit, it's a sort of analogy I'm doing. It's a bit the same with culture. We realize that with those 6 values, we can really have all the nuances between the cultures. So what are those 6 values? It's a bit cruel because I will go very quickly to describe it. Sorry for the ones who already know that. But actually, we analyzed the attitude towards 6 dimensions. The first one is the attitudes towards power. Any society has to organize itself. Well, some have decided to concentrate the power at the top of a triangle. That's called centralization. And some have decided not to do it that way and to organize themselves with less centralization. It is a fundamental difference. So the attitude towards power will be different from one culture to another. And I take that opportunity as for every of those dimensions, it is something we are told when we are very young. If you are a parent or yourself when you have been educated, when you were 5, 6, or 7, we ask you to obey to the teacher, obey to your parents, less or not, and the way you obey to it. And it gives you a sort of programmation, if you want, of your mind. The next value is the attitudes towards autonomy. As I said, every society has to organize themselves, but societies have decided to allow more autonomy to the individual or less autonomy to the individual. The next one is the attitude towards motivation, as I call it. Geert Hofstede will talk about masculinity. What does it mean? It means that some cultures, you have to be always seen as someone being successful, being able to take challenges, being able to perform well. And some others, it's less the case. If you show yourself always being strong, you are a bit ridiculous. To take 2 extreme examples, in our case, well, the Chinese are going to be quite high in masculinity, proud, wanting to be successful. The opposite on the scale are the Scandinavian countries. You can only explain the Scandinavian countries by taking that value into consideration, where to be successful, to be the best in the world, and so on and so forth, is ridiculous. And it is something, again, which has been, which is part of education. another real breakthrough in sociology, and that comes from Geert Hofstede, is the attitude towards uncertainty. Up to then, we consider that the sensitivity to uncertainty, and we see that now with the COVID, the attitude towards uncertainty was considered as being something very personal, therefore very psychological, very individual. Well, Hofstede has really demonstrated that it is cultural. It's the whole population who is either very, very sensitive to uncertainty or less sensitive to uncertainty. And there again, you have big differences. Again, I can take the Chinese, who are low in that sensitivity, against, for example, the Japanese or the Belgians or the French, who are high in that sensitivity. The fifth value is the attitudes towards time. We all know that there are people and cultures where time is something which is not accountable for a time life, but is much longer than that. And the last value, it's the attitudes towards happiness. To summarize it brutally, the question is, on one side, are we on earth to be happy and to enjoy ourselves, or are we on earth to suffer? And there again, it's very rich to have a sort of, scores for each and every country for all those 6 values. So that's the work, the essential work of Geert Hofstede. And indeed, that's what inspired us. Mark, yes? Is there any question? No? Okay. So we have a detailed approach here, but we end up with 110 countries, 6 scores for countries. And as the objective was to find a system, a method to know how to negotiate in the world, it would have been very, very complicated to write a book and find an answer to each and every country. So with the authorization of Geert Hofstede, we decided to simplify it a bit. Actually, we said, okay, for each and every scores, either they are high, medium, or low. So we aggregate all the countries having a similar results in power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty, avoidance. And by doing that exercise, we realized that we end up with 7 different clusters. And that's the approach we suggest in the book. That's an helicopter view, of course. It is not detailed, but it allows us to confront our own cultures with another and see how it works. So we did that sort of academical exercise, if you want. And by our experience, we realized that it really fits very well and it helped the people. So we end up with one book, which is really based on the 6D model. It's an helicopter view approach, so we wrote in the book, and I tell you now to be very cautious and to take that more as a first preparation exercise. It doesn't mean that every Chinese you are going to meet is going to be a typical Chinese, and maybe I'm not a typical Belgian and you are not typical of your culture. Nevertheless, if you, in your ignorance, before meeting anybody, assume that a Chinese is going to understand the Chinese way of doing business, you cannot be totally wrong. So we end up with 7 mindsets, therefore 7 types of negotiators, therefore 7 types of negotiation. And I must say here that the book is not about the technique of negotiation. We consider that you can already negotiate in your own country. We only take into consideration here the cultural aspect of a negotiation, not all the attitudes and the tricks and the rules of a traditional negotiation. We consider that you can do that in your own culture, so probably the main problem you have when you go abroad is to adapt yourself to their way of negotiating. So what I suggest now is that we go briefly through the 7 mindsets, and then we analyze at the end what are the impacts meeting for one mindset to meeting a Chinese mindset. So the first one we describe here with that mental image with 2 boxing gloves is this one. And that's the very common vocabulary that mindset will use. It's competition, accountability, innovation, achievement, ambition, win and lose, the importance to be a winner. We call them the competitors. Negotiation for them is a battle. It is a fight. It is a match. Life is about winning versus losing. So the important thing for the competitor is to be a winner. And to them, 1 + 1 is never 3. To them, either what he got, the opponent lose. So he sees the negotiation as something which can be quite rude. And it's very nice to see that he or she who comes second is the first loser. So there's always a way to be the first one. And actually, I don't know if you see my screen totally. Could someone tell me from the organization can unmute and tell me if you see
okay. Yeah.
totally my screen?
You mean the column with the different competitors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, for me at least, but I don't know for the others.
So everybody seems. So we have a file here on the right who gives you a few of the important cultures being considered by that study, by us, as competitors. Okay, mostly Anglo-Saxon, but not only. Okay. I have a personal anecdote to tell you about that. For an American Chamber of Commerce, I'm not going to give the name of the country, they wanted to do some, to organize a lecture about our book, and they asked us to illustrate it. So that's what we sent to them, you know, simply the cover of the book, the title, the undertitle, and our names. And they came back to us and say, oh, it's very nice, thank you very much, but we have a suggestion and we would like to modify your presentation that way. So negotiate like a local and win like a star. To them, it was, you know, quite obvious that the important thing was to be a star. That's the objective, you know. A little anecdote to illustrate really how competitors are acting in everything of their action in business. Now, the second mindset we have is that one, the steer wheel, and the vocabulary is expertise, process, reliability, deductive thinking, structure, autonomy, standardization principles. We call them the organizers. To them, the negotiation is a process because they see life really as something who has to be structured, and negotiation must be structured as well. First negotiate the process, then follow it strictly. That's our advice. When you start a negotiation with an organizer, well, the very first thing to do is to say, what is your process for such a negotiation? If I'm a potential supplier, what is the process to accept a new supplier? He loves that sort of question, and you start on the right foot by negotiation with and understanding and recognize his way of doing business. And experts are the power holders. That's mindset loves expertise, and everything goes through experts. And these are the main countries having that mindset. Again, not every German is going to be a typical organizer, but if you act like a German in Germany, well, you can't be totally wrong. And once you know the personality of your interlocutor, you can always adapt yourself, of course. The third one is this one. So you see a jigsaw. Why is that? Because this is really a negotiator who really wants to find a consensus. He's a bit the opposite of the competitor because he thinks that a real good partnership is when both partners are winning. I revealed a bit one of the countries by talking about the polder model. For the ones who know the Netherlands, it is very consciously that they have a theory called the polder model, which means that they find a way to get all together and take the point of view of everybody before finalizing a deal or a decision. We call them the connected because they really want a connection with everybody. Everybody around the table has his word to say and can influence the decision. So to be very pragmatic, if you negotiate in those countries, I will reveal soon which they are. Everybody can be around the table. The people, the engineers, the people from the logistic, the people from the marketing, from the sales, and everybody has his word to say. So the negotiation for them is a question of win-win and consensus. They want also the supplier to be part of it. But there is a but. Finding a consensus requires direct and open communication. So sometimes they can show themselves a bit rude and direct before coming to the final deal. So I'm not saying that win-win means that they are very kind and say yes to everything. But they are looking for a very clear situation. And these are the countries which are concerned. So we have mainly the Netherlands, Scandinavian countries there, but of course all the other countries are also have a score about their attitudes towards consensus. So the fourth one are using another vocabulary, which is philosophy, elegance, honor, hierarchy, protocol, analysis. We call them the diplomats. They are quite elaborate people. Negotiation is a ballet diplomatique. It takes time. We have to respect the rituals. We have to show self as being someone reliable. There are a lot of unsaid. Your counterpart is typically one of the traps is that they are not very precise on their mandate. They have a title, they are in charge of, and they are not going to reveal exactly what is their power. They always want to show that they have, or pretend they have high power. So the trap is to make sure who is really handling the power in their organization. And that is mainly, as you can see, the Latin countries. Okay, so far? Good. So we have seen 4 different mindsets. You remember in my presentation that I was mentioning individualism. Well, we have seen with those 4 first ones, only people being individualist. But they are a bit the exception in the world, because individualists are 15% of the world population. The world population is made in the vast majority by what we call in our vocabulary collectivist cultures. And now we are entering the collectivist cultures where we have...
that in webinaire, Astrid. Tu peux pas être comme ça.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Could you write down, please, who is speaking first? Who is speaking? Good. May I ask you to write down your question, please, because it is, if we are all unmute, it's going to be difficult to communicate. May I ask you to...
Or if it is not linked with the lecture, please mute your microphone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go on. The diplomats. So I was saying it's mainly the Latin countries, okay? But there are others, but mainly the diplomats are made of the Latin countries. So I was saying that we have seen 4 individualistic mindsets. Now we are going to see the 3 next one. But a little anecdote before we go. It's a personal anecdote between me. I'm part of the Latin country, being Belgium, and I was negotiating a prize with a British. We decided to fix an appointment, and he said, okay, I want you to meet in my office at 2:30, and we have 2 hours. We have more than enough time to agree on the final bonus he wanted to obtain from us. So we negotiate quite a long time, and at the end came to a sort of agreement. And he said around 4 in the afternoon, okay, now set, we can start with that. I was young at that time and didn't realize there was a problem of mandate, because I said, give me just till tomorrow morning and I will confirm our agreement about that. And he was not happy. He said, we fixed an appointment here today to finalize the deal. Why do you want me to wait till tomorrow morning? And I simply said, well, I have to call my boss. I have to make sure it's a decision. We are talking about a lot of money here. So I'm the advocate of that solution. So, but give me up to tomorrow morning to validate it by my boss. And that's where I realized that I had a limited mandate, which I knew, but I never officially told him. So that's one of the little trap we have in negotiation, especially for the diplomats, that we are not always very clear about our mandate. We are rather indirect and diplomatic, and he's very direct, okay? We have a partial mandate and he has a full mandate. So he was disappointed by me. I was not clear enough. So I give you an example, an anecdote of one of my mistakes so you can avoid to commit it yourself in the future. Now, another mindset is this one. It's a mindset where the vocabulary is indirect communication, relationship, face, gaining face or losing face, procedures, harmony, hierarchy, formality, honor. We call them the reciprocators. It's all about relationship. It's all about who am I dealing with? The person in front of me is vital. I have to trust the person. And negotiation is an exchange of favor. Everything must be balanced, but the way to balance it is, if I give you this, you give me something. So we are looking for a sort of give and take relationship. And it is important to get that mindset before starting a negotiation with that sort of culture. And there again, make sure you identify the real power holder. Because again, the person in front of you may have the title, may have the responsibility, for example, to place orders, but it doesn't have the final decision as to know if you are the right supplier or not. And it takes time. So here we have a list of cultures where we think that mindset is appropriate. And again, I invite you to be cautious. Maybe your interlocutor is not typical of his country, but it was to be tested and to do it as they do in their country. I have a personal anecdote about that. I had a Moroccan important distributor. I was visiting every 6 months. And one day he called me and said, I have to see you urgently. I said, yeah, but the appointment is only in 3 months' time. I want to see you earlier than that. I have to talk to you in person. So I changed all my plan. And I was, at that time, I remind you, selling paper, and he was a paper distributor. And when I was in his office, he said, okay, JP, I trust you, and I would like to start a new business in LED lamps. It was 15 years ago. It was the beginning of a new technology in electricity. And I was totally stunned. I said, I'm a paper specialist. Yes, I know, but I know that in France, there are important suppliers. And as I trust you, I thought you could help me finding the right supplier. And the one you are going to introduce to me is the one I'm going to work with. Just to illustrate the importance of the relationship. To him, it was not that important to find the technical solution than to find someone who was introduced to him and really advocate a solution. So it's another mindset, and you better, get used to it. The other mindset I suggest is this one: flexibility, loyalty, relationship, hierarchy, adaptability, harmony. are very important words and concepts for him. We call them the maronians. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So we can talk a lot about a lot of things, but as long as we have not finalized the deal, nothing is done. A contract is not meant to govern the relationship. For some cultures like mine, like individualist cultures, we put everything black on white, and at the end we have a contract, and the contract is a sort of Bible, if you want, if I may use that word, who is going to be really the essence of all our relationship and guide us through all the relationship in the future. For them, it's just a sort of ritual, which is not important. What is important is really the person and the reality. They have that flexibility not to take really the contract into consideration at least at that stage. And again, it is very important to identify the real power holder. And that's where we find that sort of mindset. So as we talk today about the Chinese, well, the Chinese are considered by us as maronians in the way they do business, in the way they negotiate. I will develop that, of course, later in my lecture. A personal anecdote, yes. My son was living in Beijing. I wanted to visit him, but it was a long way. And I wanted to justify that, of course, professionally. And I said to him, okay, I'm coming visiting you, but I would like to have a look at the market. So could you find a few names of companies where I could get in touch with important people, if only one or two, so I can start to a bit understand how the market is structured. And he said, okay, it's hard work, but I'll try to come back with some information. I have maybe a few friends who can help me. And 2 days later, he gave me a long list of 500 company names, telephone numbers, and everything. And I was stunned. And I make it short. I make the anecdote short for you. But when I visited him, I said, I would like to meet the person who gave you that list. And I met a young CEO, friend of my son, and asked the question and said, where is that list coming from? Well, that's my list of customers. I was stunned because in our culture, in my culture at least, you don't give a list of customers with all the names and the telephone numbers and the emails address. And I explained to him, I said, wow, that's very generous of you. Why did you do that? That's your own list. He said, it's just a list of names. It doesn't have any value. But to me, yes. Well, to him, not. And to make the conversation, later in the conversation, I said, but why have you been so generous with my son? Because I understand now that you don't know him so well. And he said, well, I gave him a favor. Now he will give me a favor in back as well. So it is a sort of, you know, again, it shows the importance of the relationship, the connections, and they have even a name for that, Guangxi. To them, the network is fundamental. And the last mindset we have is a mindset using the vocabulary of process, gaining phase, indirect precision, honor system. it's what we call the craftsman. Negotiations is the search of perfection. Nimawashi makes sure you identify the power holders. You guess that we are in Japan. Actually, Japan is so special that we had to make a special mindset to them because they are not comparable to any others. And as I explained at the beginning, we try to regroup, to aggregate all the cultures which have something in common as far as the 6 values are concerned. And the Japanese have absolutely nothing in common. So they are a bit unique. I will skip that. So we have 7 mindsets. And now, you know, the important thing to understand before starting any relationship and negotiation with someone is to understand your own mindset. Where do you stand against the other mindset? Now, how to negotiate with Chinese is the key topic here. Well, it depends on your mindset. Negotiation process for a Westerner. Well, here are the 4 mindsets which are really Westerners or individualistic, I would say. And that's how we very traditionally describe a negotiation process. We have 7 points. So preparation, establishing contact, establishing trust, analyzing the needs of the potential customer, presenting a solution, negotiating the price, finalizing the deal. So we have a line and we go from one step to the other towards the end. That's the traditional mindset of a Westerner. Well, for a Marathonian, the line is different because it goes that way. It's not a straightforward line. It is a discussion where we can start and then go in circle and come back to the beginning and envisage every solution, every possibility before closing the deal. So of course, that's pure theory and it can be in some circumstances a bit simpler, but I wanted to express in a little drawing the difference of the way they think. They may envisage all the possibilities. It may take a lot of time. By discussing, they will test you and your company and your proposition and envisage all the possibilities. Time is not important. I have met dozens of businessmen who had planned a business trip in China for 5, 7, or 10 days and had to change the date of their return flight. And after 3 weeks, said to the Chinese counterpart, well, sorry, I have to leave tomorrow. We have no deal. And suddenly everything was possible. So indeed, the Chinese mindset is very detailed and is very free to envisage all the possibilities, go back to the previous discussions, to clarify things, to retest you and see if you are coherent in your explanation. So it requires, from a Westerner point of view, a lot of patience. If you are not a Westerner and you are, for example, a reciprocator, that is your way of doing business. It is not a straight line because there the essential is to really establish trust. And that can take a lot of time. As long as you have not passed that test, you cannot go forward. And that's why you understand that reciprocators are indeed maybe have less difficulties with marathonians than a Westerner. The Westerner is very straightforward. Reciprocators understand the hesitation, the importance of the relationship, understand that things may take time before establishing a total trust. And just to mention it, for the craftsman, it goes into details for each and every step. So that's just my way of designing in the drawing the difference between the Westerners and a Japanese. Now, how to negotiate with the Chinese? Well, it depends on your mindset. If you are one of the other mindset, well, you this illustrates well the way you have to adapt yourself, and the other way around. I mean, a Chinese can understand sometimes irritation from Westerners when things are, you know, slowing down or going back to a previous point. The Westerner has considered that we have already discussed all that. Why do we come back now to that? We have developed all this point. Why do we come back now? And the Chinese has to understand that it is stressful for the Westerner. So everybody has to adapt to each other in that case. Now I'm checking the time. Okay, we are close to the end. Now, of course, that's detailed in the book, but what we do in the book is we take every step. We remind the people how they do and how they should do in the local market. So I will ask you one simple question and see if you can answer on the writing box, the dialogue of the box. Could you please tell me which mindset would be the easiest to establish contact with? I mean, let's take an example where you are simply aware that one potential customer could need your service or goods or whatever, and you need to get in touch with them. You have the telephone number, you have the email. Which one is the easiest to get in touch with by simply giving a phone call or sending an email? Out of the 7, there is one which is more open to get really a phone call and say, here I am, I'm coming from out of the blue, and I'm a potential supplier for you. I'm working in your field. Could you let me know? So I see the diplomats, organizer, network. The third one, I mean the connected. Diplomat, competitors, competitors. First one, competitors, competitors, reciprocators, organizers. I leave you the time to answer. Okay. Well, to me, the number one, easiest one is the competitors. Because competitors are always looking for potential new deal, and they are quite flexible to switch to a new solution if there is anything, any potential. Some of you have mentioned diplomats. Well, I understand that, but indeed it is possible, but statistically more difficult than competitors. Some of you have mentioned connected people. that would be probably my choice for the second, number 2. Connected people are indeed quite open, although they have their connections and they have a strong relationship with their supplier. I had no intention to tell you that one, but I have an anecdote. I was negotiating with a Dutch potential customer. Actually, he was already customer, but I was not supplying a specific product. And I told him I would like to be a supplier for that product. So he negotiated thoroughly, but he had already a supplier for that product. And at the end, I finalized the offer, and he said, "That's a nice offer, very competitive, thank you very much. Now, I need a bit," so I said, "When can we start?" And he said, "Well, I need 2 weeks because I need to contact my actual supplier and see if he can match your offer." So as a Latin person, I was shocked because in the Latin mentality, this is not something acceptable. For a Dutch, it was more than obvious. His good, fair supplier was already into place. He knew him for a long time. Before letting him down, he would go to him, present him my offer and say, "Do you want to keep the business? You have to match this." But the way he very openly told me, it was something I was supposed to accept and understand. It was not, it was not abnormal. He wanted me to understand that. And I eventually understood it because indeed, once you are into place with a customer, he would do the same for you. The connection between the supplier and the customer is so strong that we don't let him down like this. We have to warn him and we have to say, we have met a new potential supplier who can do better than you. Can you match this? So that's related to my question. Yes, the connected people are quite open to receive the call and a new supplier, but be careful, it doesn't mean that they are ready to switch rapidly. As the competitors would not do that, I would switch very rapidly and let down the previous one to give you the place if you have a better offer. Of course, I cannot here and now detail everything, but in the book, we compare the different situations in establishing contact, establishing trust, analyzing the needs, and so on and so forth. Okay, what do we have left? I have 1 minute left. So, oh yeah, we have made a little website where you can go. Although I checked it this morning and it wasn't working, but you write down the title of the book, www.negotiatelikealocal.com, and you have a little advice about how, depending on your nationality and the nationality of your counterpart, you have a little advice about how they see the negotiation and how do you see it. And the comparison makes it clear for you where are your main potential. I think that's all for now. I think I'm on the time, Geoffrey.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. If you, yeah, I mean, it's okay. We still have a little time, but as I said just before, it was for the discussion time. So if you're okay here, so let's start for discussion time. Maybe Joey, you want to add something first, or microphone?
After questions or now? Okay.
Oh, after question, yeah, no problem.
Oh, maybe I can say something now.
Okay.
And let the audience to think about the question. Actually, thank you very much, Mr. Jean-Pierre Coene, for your wonderful speech.
Yeah, thank you.
I met Mr. McKejob in my office in the summer of 2018. At that time, I just arrived in Luxembourg for 3 months. So Mr. Kejob recommended to me this book, Negotiate Like a Local, and discussed with me the possibility of having it published in Chinese version. Then last year, 2019, we were happy to see the coming out of the Chinese version of this book. Then today, here, we honorably have Mr. Coene here. Your proposals and suggestions for cultural differences in international business negotiation are very helpful and practical. Cultural differences and cross-cultural communication are very interesting topics. They are so interesting that we can't stand to travel a long way to other remote areas or countries for business. Just for me, I just traveled from China to here. I just was attracted by the charm of the cultural differences. So we enjoy such a cultural differences. Thank you again, Mr. Coene, for bringing us such interesting topic.
Thank you very much.
Also, we thank you to all the audience for participating in this activity. Now the time is for you to raise questions, and Mr. Coene will give you some answers. Thank you.
My pleasure. So don't hesitate to write down questions if you have, things where maybe not clear to you, or maybe you wonder what is possible or not. I have already 1 or 2 questions, but please don't hesitate to write them down so I can see how you feel about that. I must say that, and I have a first question here to illustrate that. Culture is very emotional, and some people have difficulties to accept their own characteristic. There is no right or wrong in culture. There are only ways to do things. There are hidden values. They are because there is a big difference between the identity and the culture. Identity is something very conscious that we can choose to have. Identity means that we are more, it's more the wishes than the reality. If you see the identity of, I'll take a plain example of the French. Well, they want to see them as a leading culture as far as moral values. They want to see themselves as being leader for some concepts in the world. They have indeed in their history given away a lot of fundamental democratic values to the world, and they want to see it in that way. So sometimes it is, for some French audience, painful for them to see, oh yeah, indeed we are hierarchical. Oh yes, indeed we are indirect. We don't like rude thing to be said. We consider as rude to be sometimes straight to the point. We don't find that elegant. It's not our philosophy, and so on and so forth. So it is sometimes difficult for some people to take our vision, especially expressed in a few minutes like me, like I do today. It's a bit cruel. So I'll have a few of your questions. Latin American countries, what are their mindsets? Well, there are several mindsets in Latin America. The first one which comes to my mind are reciprocators. It means that indeed more collectivist people working all together, being that concept that as far as negotiation is concerned, it's an exchange of favor in the way they negotiate, in the way they act. I'm trying to get another question. How are regional cultures taken into account? Well, in my case, in the exercise I'm doing now, they are not taken into account because it's an helicopter view. And it's only the very first small step I invite people to take before starting a negotiation in a foreign country. But of course, once this step is done, you enter in a world where you have more consciousness about your own culture, maybe develop your analyze about your own way of doing things and your own personality, and observe the personalities and the possible local cultures of your counterpart. You open your mind. Here it's just one little mind opener, but it's the book has not the pretension to answer to all the nuances, but there are nuances indeed. And I jump to the opportunity here because I see that one interlocutor is shocked to see that I spoke about Belgium as being a Latin country. Is probably Flemish, and he's shocked by the idea that it could be considered as a Latin culture. Nevertheless, again, it is a local culture which has its nuances with the Latin countries, but the closest culture, the closest mindset to the Flemish one are indeed the diplomats. And it's not something which is indeed popular, I would say, in Belgium, because the Flemish have a German language and they see themselves more close to the German than to the French or the Dutch, who they share partly the language. Nevertheless, the closest mindset for the Flemish is the way of doing business and the way of negotiating, and not the German. And I take the example of several businessmen I've met and my own experience, and especially with Flemish companies who work with German companies. They get along very well, but they don't have the same way to, exactly the same way to do business. I take another culture, another question, sorry. Any other questions?
You have two questions already written about the African Arabic countries and the development of mass travels and technology, about a standardized transnational mindset emerging, from Raphael and from Oksana.
For the last question, allow me to speak very freely. It is a very common thought from the Westerners to think that all the world is going to become to adopt the Western values. I think it's a dream, if not a nightmare. let's take the example of China. A lot of people may think that China is adopting a way of living, and therefore will gradually adopt all our values. I'm afraid that's not going to be the case. Chinese are Chinese, and they will stick to their fundamental values. They take in the Western world the way of doing business just for the sake of it and for its advantages. But they are not going to change themselves. And a young Chinese will indeed love to have an iPhone or a MacBook Pro computer, and will maybe like the same music as a young Westerner of the same age, but it will not adopt all the values and the way of living of an American, to take an example. So that's a very global question. I give you a very global answer. I think there is a big unset dream behind the Western way of doing business, that all the world is going to become more unified and will have the same values because they love the same products. I don't think it's true, but that's my own personal point of view, and I don't have the time to develop that. The other question was about the Arabic countries, a very important part, of course, of the business world. To give a very helicopter view, they are globally reciprocators in the way they negotiate and the way they do business with us. And there again, they are going to buy our products, but they are not going to change their values. They are not going to change their religions. They are not going to change their fundamental beliefs. They are not going to change the way they consider the family, and so on and so forth. Another question, you have seen
another one, the last one now from Jela, if I'm correct for the pronunciation. What makes China categorized as the marathonians and not as the reciprocators?
Well, the main difference is, well, there are differences. The Chinese are, you remember this, the values. They are hierarchical. Indeed, reciprocators are hierarchical. They are quite, as far as individualism, they are quite low. Reciprocators are quite low. The difference being in masculinity. The Chinese are quite masculine. It means the importance of gaining face, the importance of being successful, the importance of having pragmatic results to show themselves always strong and successful, which is less the case in reciprocators. And uncertainty avoidance is usually quite higher for reciprocators and very low for Chinese. China is not afraid of uncertainty. China consider uncertainty as an opportunity. We all know that. You have seen that already before. China consider that crises are an opportunity to change and to go forward and find new opportunities, which you don't find within the reciprocators, which are more reluctant to uncertainty. So I hope I've answered the question very briefly. Of course, we can talk all day about that, but that's the main reason if I have to summarize it.
Another one is from Chen Li Bei. How do you think of getting an introductory talk from the beginning of a nego process to ask directly what type the counterpart is and what's their expectation in terms of process and relationships? This would be good for us working in an international culture. Did you hear?
Yes, and I'm reading it through to make sure I understand.
Okay, okay.
I think it is very clever. I think it is indeed, when I was totally lost in some contacts, in a first meeting or a second meeting, to understand a bit the culture of the person I have in front of me, I sometimes took the liberty to say, I have the feeling we are confronted here with a cultural problem. That's how I see, or that's how my company is seeing the situation. And we would do this and that and that and that. What is your point of view? How would you do it? In other words, it is always very useful to put the cultural problem on the table, even in a business negotiation, to say at a certain moment, and preferably at the very beginning, have we a problem there, or is there something I must know, or is there something I must understand from your vision? It is one, very respectful, very humble, and I've never seen an interlocutor or a culture who is shocked by that attitude. Quite the opposite. It is very respectful. So sometimes when you are lost, you can simply tell your by your attitude that you are open, but you are a bit lost. And I don't know if I think I'll answer the question. Let me know if I don't. But I think I'll answer the question. So don't hesitate to openly say if you have a problem with your interlocutor and you maybe suspect or think there is a different cultural attitude.
Yes, Jean-Pierre, I think, yeah, you answered the question. I think that it's really important to say it in the beginning that we don't have with the counterpart, we don't have a conflict yet, we don't have problems yet, then it's easier to say that. And your 7 types, maybe we can turn them as questions, indirect question to ask, and to ask them to find out what types of people in front of us.
Yes.
From the beginning.
I like your question because I tend to think that, as I said, maybe your interlocutor is not typical of your of his culture, but our work shows that actually there are 7 approaches. There are not 19 approaches. So either your interlocutor is a typical marathonian, and you consider him as a marathonian. But maybe, for whichever reason, he's more an organizer type of guy. So you can feel that and then switch your way of doing things and consider him as an organizer. Why not? So whatever, as long as, what I wanted to give here is a sort of tool for people who are working internationally, who are switching from one culture to another in their day-to-day business, and to be able to switch their mind. Over 7 methods, they are improvisation. At least if they have a clear vision about the 7 possibilities, there are 7 types of negotiators. So you assume that your negotiator, if he's Chinese, is a marathonian, but be careful, maybe he's a competitor, maybe he's an organizer, maybe he's connected, whatever. But yeah, he's not something out of the blue, a special beast, which, okay, there are 7 ways to do negotiation. That's what I mean.
Yes, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We have another question. To what extent does the person you're doing business with identify with his or her own national culture?
But I think I just answered to it. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, but you will feel quite quickly, and that's maybe where you say, you tell him the truth. You say, what are your wishes? What is your vision? Should I become one of your supply? What are your rules? How do you expect us to work? How do you expect me to help you? You can say that to someone if you met him for 45 minutes. You can be quite open to say, could you help me to understand you and your company and your culture, how you do things here? And could you give me an example? And it is sometimes, I think it's always positive to do it that way. If you have a doubt.
Do we have maybe a last question or any comments to
any
have?
Comments, any question, don't hesitate. Yes, someone is asking me if he can receive the slides. Yes, we can leave us your, send an email to Geoffrey or to Confucius organization, and we will send you the PDF of the presentation. It's also recorded, so you can also, for the ones who missed the beginning, you can have all the details in the registration.
I try probably to put it on social medias or anywhere, or send it individually to the person who wants to see again, or for the people either who missed just a part or the whole lecture by email or anyway. There will be solutions for everyone.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay, good.
So Jean-Pierre, thank you very much for coming. Thank you to have given us some keys to better understand how to negotiate with local people and talk about those different mindsets and cultural difference.
Geoffrey, may I interrupt you a second? I have a very interesting last question, which is asked here. Yeah, sure. Because I've known that situation. What about if around the table there are different cultures? Well, again, it is extremely rich for you if you manage to know the nationality of the people around the table, and to make that analyze first, to say, okay, this one would work, would do it that way. This one would do it that way. They are supposed to be colleagues. They are supposed to share a common point of view. But we are not naive, though we all know that maybe they don't. So this one would do it that way. This one would do it that way. And if you are around the table, you have several nationalities. It is hard work of preparation, but very, very exciting to make sure that, to understand, let's try to guess, how is it going to happen? Who is going to react, this one and this one, towards this proposition? Who is going to be satisfied? Who is not? Who can become your ally quite quickly? Who can be against you but will not tell you because it's not in his culture, and so on and so forth. So yes, I've had very successful and exciting negotiation with companies who are working internationally, and you have around the table several cultures. It is extremely interesting to, in your preparation time, to know the cultures and try to guess a bit how it's going to work. And in some cases, I could guess that the general manager had a problem with this sales manager, or the opposite. because they were not actually tuned, and they couldn't fit easily. And once you know that in a meeting, you can observe that, and you can feel a bit where are the cold winds. And of course, there is a corporate culture, and that again is a very nice question to ask and say, what is your corporate organizational culture actually? How do you do it here? Because normally all the colleagues should agree on a similar way to do things. I think we cover all the questions we have seen.
Yes, I think so. So thanks again. Do not hesitate to go on our website, Confucius Institute at the University of Luxembourg. We have also a Facebook page, LinkedIn, YouTube, and WeChat. I let you know that this book in English and Chinese version will be available in our library. So do not hesitate to come by and have more detail by reading this one. And let's keep in touch for the further events. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Thanks again, Jean-Pierre. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, my pleasure, my pleasure.
And see you later.
See you later, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.